На трибунах аллеют знамена, облака в поднебесье плывут. На зеленом ковре стадиона разноцветные майки цветут.
Привет. The RFN Podcast is back again this week to discuss Krylia making the quarter-final of the Russian Cup as the sole lower league representative left, Tambov's continued existence thanks to the generosity of some unknown benefactors and other RPL clubs, a certain transfer of one Quincy Promes back into Spartak in the RPL, and Krasnodar's first leg loss against Dinamo Zagreb. Despite Marcus Berg's brilliance up top, the side forgot how to defend after the higher-ups at the club themselves forgot that defenders were even necessary to purchase in the first place. The usual suspects are back again, as always. David, looking forward to this weekend?
Oh, yeah. Long time coming, so yeah, very much looking forward to it.
And Richard Pike. Now, Richard, I'll allow you some early time for a post-Moscow derby gloat right at the start here if you'd want to.
Yeah, no. Well, I only do Dynamo for the site. I'm not as engaged in them as you are with Spartak, but yeah, because I follow them for the site, I'll happily take the victory over the weekend. So.
Yeah, now as you mentioned, over the weekend, Russian football did actually return in earnest, as a plethora of sides took part in the Russian Cup last 16 knockout stages. Now, to quickly run through the results, they were as follows. Zenit 1, Arsenal 2, Dynamo 2, Spartak 0, Siska 2, Ska 0, Krasnodar 1, Sochi 2, Logo 3, Tambov 0, Rostov 0, Akhmat 1, Ufa versus Ural was postponed, and Khimki 0, Krylia 4. So at the very start of the weekend, Zenit was shocked by Arsenal 2-1. David, you cast an eye over this game, so what happened to the incumbent champions?
I did. I missed the opening stages of the game, but tuned in just in time to see Dejan Lovren handball a giveaway penalty. So that was grand. It was a bit unlucky. I'll give him that. Like ball looped over, I think, from a cross. Someone headed it. It hit the bar and came straight down onto Lovren's arm, which was outstretched because he was trying to head it over the bar. But you know, as the rules are rules, and it was a penalty. And then, so before it even joined in, it was 1-1. Then it took a lead, bit of a scruffy goal off a set piece, and then Arsenal equalised, also a scruffy goal, deflected free kick. And then for the rest of the game, Zenit just, I don't know, it just didn't feel like they were ever really going to do anything. Arsenal just soaked up the pressure like they would, not like you would expect. A team winning away in St. Petersburg, and Zenit, they're playing without Malcolm and without some of their what you might put down as key players. You have Sutomin and Mostovoy as like the Y players, which isn't really the most penetrative players. No Drusi, no Asmoon, no Malcolm, and they really just didn't create anything. It didn't really ever look like they were going to get back into the game, despite their I don't have the stats in front of me, but I expect they have very high percentage of possession. And Arsenal just shut them out and defended pretty well when they needed to. I remember I thought Dobnio was doing pretty well, and Gregolava had a good game as well at the back. Evans Kangwa causing trouble on the counter when needed to, just to carry the ball and get away up the pitch. So, disappointing, and they're gonna. I've been backing them to win the title, but early days as the season restart, they need these key players back to try and make that push. If Asmoon and Drusi and Malcolm are going to be out for much longer, then it could turn into a struggle for them at the top, which would be good, nice in terms, a nice title race, but not ideal for them.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, this is Parfyonov's first victory over Zenit since he was actually a Spartak player in 2002. So it's been quite a long time coming for him, but very well deserved result, and it is definitely somewhat of a surprise, but a welcome one to see the cup going into the hands of a different team this year and potentially changing up the European qualification spots at the end of the season. Now, Richard, you seem pretty buoyant after Dynamo's 2-0 victory at home to Spartak. So how did the Blues pull off this win?
Having watched nearly all this game, I thought it was quite a balanced game, I have to say. little more even than the 2-0 scoreline suggested. I mean, obviously, Dynamo got in at half-time with a 1-0 lead, thanks to a penalty in the first half. And then second half, first 15 minutes of the second half, I thought Spartak came back at them and played quite well. And there was a glorious chance at 1-0. I think one of the Spartak players, I've forgotten who it was, shot the ball at goal. It was in the penalty box. Shot the ball at goal. Shunin saved it, but only parried it, and it went right into the path of Victor Moses. And it was a glorious chance to make it 1-1. But the finish was quite tame. Shunin saved it and this time held on to it. And it seemed after that, like that Dynamo then suddenly started to get more of a control back in the game. And I really liked at times the way that they pressed Spartak off the ball. There was a really good analysis piece on Register. And it basically, the title kind of this piece sums up basically what happened in the game. It was Dynamo forced Spartak to make decisions quickly, and Tedesco's team had a problem with it. And that kind of is what it is, this gegenpressing style instigated by a German coach, Chancellor Schwartz. Really, played a pivotal role in Dynamo's win. And the second goal in the game from Konstantin Chukavin was a superb back heel. If you haven't seen it, I really advise those that haven't seen it to find highlights on the internet. It was delicious back heel from a free kick into the penalty box, facing away from the goal, and it was a lovely goal. And yes, Dynamo came through a tough test. Obviously Dynamo Spartak, one of the bigger sides in the league, was going to go out this round, and Dynamo managed to get the job done. And a good sign for the restart. Schwartz is integrating young players, especially Chukavin. He's also giving minutes as well to Guryov. It's encouraging to see some of these young academy products get minutes and frequent minutes too. And it bodes well for the future, because obviously a lot of the some of the foreign players have, like Sylvester Boone, Clinton Ng, can be phased out in the summer, and that also frees up foreign spots for Dynamo to go and try and attract some new players in the market, so they can really have a go next season at closing the gap at the top of the league. So quite encouraging signs. And but this season, to me, the cup's definitely on now for Dynamo. It's an excellent opportunity for them to push for this title now. Zenit are out, Spartak are out. So the cup represents a real chance now for Dynamo. This is a club that's not won a trophy in 26 years. So, optimism for the restart ahead with this cup win.
Yeah, and of course, Dynamo, aside from the cup, they're only actually 3 points behind Sochi, who currently occupy fourth in the RPL as well. So, some real upward momentum from Dynamo. And I agree. I really like some of the young crop of academy players that they've got coming through at the minute who've really been impressing. And if I remember correctly, last time I checked, that Dynamo were very successful in the youth league and were top, with a lot of these players making the step up. Now, to discuss Spartak from a bit myself, Domenico Tedesco had actually experimented, as he claimed it himself, with a back four during the entirety of the winter. And then when it came to the Dynamo match, he once again lined his side up in a back four, playing Victor Moses on the wing instead of in right wing back. And not that I think that was the fault of the loss or the reason for the loss. I agree with what you said, David. I think that I think that they really struggled with Dynamo's high press, and it's not the first time that Spartak have struggled with that this season. Sochi play again quite a high pressing game, and have taken points to Spartak this season quite convincingly as well. They tend to do better when they're a little bit of a glass cannon. They tend to do better when they're really dominating a side and one with backs against the wall, rather than someone who really gets up in the faces. However, Spartak have had a little bit of a massive boost since the game with today. They announced the signing of Quincy Promes from Ajax. Of course, everyone knows that name. He is eponymous with the RPL and RFN listeners. Is the Dutch winger for 8.5 million euros. Now, we do have a new YouTube video that'll be getting dropped on Saturday morning, Saturday early afternoon. That'll be about Promes' time in Russia and Spartak last time, and be probably a must listen for most Spartak fans. And it was actually the deregistration of Oston Urunov, the quite highly rated Uzbek, and his subsequent loan move to Ufa, which allowed Promes to come in and for Spartak to keep Alex Kral and Pedro Rocha registered in the squad if needed to stay under that foreigner limit or right on the limit. Now, David, what's your thoughts on Urunov? Do you think going back to Ufa and maybe getting away from Spartak is inevitable and perhaps a good move for him?
It's a perfect move for him. The move to Spartak, it was nice at the time because he was a player who I particularly was enjoying watching. He was such a breath of life in an Ufa team, which for most people would get bored of watching. Obviously, I quite enjoy watching Ufa play anyway, but he was just a breath of fresh air. We had those two breakout players about this time last year who came into the league and started just dribbling with the ball and doing whatever they wanted, basically, which was him and Kvitra, obviously. And I think he'll make a real difference to them. At Spartak, it didn't work out because, in a general sense, obviously he was brought in with Gazizov from Ufa. Gazizov himself, obviously, that didn't work out for whatever reason. And the fans very quickly didn't get on board with Urunov. They didn't like his social media posts that he, just probably coincidentally posted the day it was announced or whatever it was of him, shopping or whatever. And he was just sort of a bit of a meme player for them. He was just Gazizov's player, Gazizov's pet, and just wasn't there for. I mean, we figured he probably wouldn't be afforded the chances because he's a young guy and Spartak have a lot of quality players. And in the position that he was playing at Ufa, which is, midfield, usually one of the attacking midfielders, in their sort of weird formation behind the striker where he would just carry the ball. And that's what we've been lacking, this season. We go back a couple of years, they had Sylvester Boone, who was one of those guys who would pick up the ball and he could just carry the ball and get Ufa up the field. And without Urunov this season to do that for them, they've been really struggling and going very direct. Obviously not scoring much as a result of it and struggling at the bottom of the table. And obviously they lost him and Fomin, but I think Urunov alone coming back in could really just change their season. Just give them that extra dynamic, that extra bit of dynamism, that extra directness on the ball rather than floating, like just going long. So, good move all around. At this age, 20 years old, he needs to be playing regularly in order to develop. And we know he's a good and talented player. Not perfect, but has all the ingredients there to take a step up to a next level, to a Spartak in the future, definitely. But he just, it didn't work out at Spartak, and that was that. So, really looking forward to watching Ufa. Obviously, it was a shame the cup match got called off because I expect he would have played. So, looking forward to seeing him hopefully play this weekend.
Yeah, it's a real shame around the transfer in general because you can tell that there's a real talent there and a blossoming talent as well. And what's so good about Urunov is that the skills that he has at his disposal isn't something that you can necessarily train into a player. You'll find decision making better with experience. You can train into him how to react in certain situations, but that pure dribbling ability, that low center of gravity, that keen eye for space and ability to hold on to the ball in difficult situations is not necessarily something that can really be trained, at least to such a raw, talented level. So it's a little bit of a shame how it worked out at Spartak for him, but to be quite honest, he probably should have made the loan move to Ufa as soon as he went to Spartak. Spartak was silly for keeping him around, and maybe it was Gazizov himself being a little bit stubborn because Gazizov is a very stubborn man. Maybe it was the whole circus at Spartak behind the scenes that they always have been and probably always will be in this regime. But the sooner he got out of there, the better, and especially after Gazizov's departure, it was just an inevitability. Richard, what's your thoughts on Urunov?
Yeah, I completely concur with you guys. I think that it was important to remember with Urunov as well that he'd only played 10 games for Ufa. He was a winter window signing last winter, and he'd only actually played 10 games for Ufa, coming from Uzbekistan, and he obviously was only 19 years old then. So I can understand why, any kid in that position, I can understand when a big club like Spartak, in Russian terms, when a big club like Spartak come call when you're going to go. but it probably was, just a season or two too early, and maybe he could have done with signing for Spartak and then going back out on loan to for the rest of the season. Like I say, getting another 25 games or so under his belt, and coming back to Spartak to challenge for a first team spot. But yeah, I'm happy now that he has gone back on loan to Ufa. Nice familiar feel to it, and wish him well. Hopefully, get some more game time, and Spartak shouldn't give up on him because I was impressed with Urunov as well last season. I think we all were. So but this is a good move for him. Get some game time under his belt, which he does need.
Yeah, certainly. And if you want to talk replacements, then there really isn't much more of a able replacement in the RPL than Quincy Promes. He left the RPL as the standout best player. He comes back as one of the best, in my opinion. That's still Nikola Vlasic, but he'll come straight into Spartak's team. He could pop up in a variety of different positions, and be it on the left wing in the 4-2-3-1 we're seeing at the weekend, with perhaps Bakayev on the opposite side in his natural role, in his best position, no longer central. If Tedesco does want to persist with the back three that he had for so long, Promes could play in behind Larson and Ponsa or Sobolev, a combination. And I feel that with Spartak, with Promes in and Kokorin and Urunov out, it's a far greater attacking prospect. So very excited to see Promes back, but hopefully Urunov likewise also has some good success at Ufa this season, because God, Ufa do desperately need it. And discussing Ufa, I'll move on, because Ufa's game against Ural was actually postponed at the weekend. It was temperatures reaching minus 30 degrees in Ufa at the weekend, so quite rightfully postponed. And that is been announced that the replay of the game will be, or the rearranged game will be taking place on the 3rd of March. Richard, you watched Siska play Ska Khabarovsk. How did Siska do in their 2-0 win?
Yeah, it was. I watched the whole of the game, and it looked it was a very routine victory for Siska. You could tell there was a division and a half difference between the two sides. They bossed possession, and completely outplayed Ska. Like we did expect it. Ska obviously only one of two non-RPL sides in the last 16 of the cup. And there was a lovely goal, and I was really happy to see this goal as well from Siska's opening goal from Ilza Akhmetov. It was a lovely strike, lovely volley into the right corner of the goal from just outside the penalty box, or in and around the penalty box. It was a lovely strike, and I was happy for him, because he's had a lot of injury issues over the last year and a half, and just to see him score that, it was a nice feeling. And then Vlasic got the second. Again, similar kind of range out in the second half. He got the second goal. Similar kind of range out from Akhmetov's. And two lovely goals, and a very routine win for Siska, who you probably would have to say now are probably considered the favourites for the cup, because obviously with Zenit and Spartak now both out, it's a great opportunity for them, and I probably will consider them the favourites for it. No, yes, and just a quick word on Jose Solomon Rondon. He came on as a second half sub and looked a little bit rusty. I think flashed at a chance and missed it when he probably could have made it 3-0. But apart from that, I thought he looked all right when he came on. We showed some nice link-up play with the forwards, and it does make you wonder why shouldn't Siska just have waited till, not brought in a forward last summer and waited till January and got Rondon in rather than the whole Geish episode, which the Adolfo Geish episode, which was but I thought Rondon came on and looked quite good. I would have liked to have seen Lars Bohinen either start or come on as a sub, but it wasn't to be. He's the other, so not Lars Bohinen, Emil Bohinen. God, Lars Bohinen, that's his dad. He's a bit too old to be playing now. But I'd like to have seen Emi Bohinen come on. That would have been quite nice, or start. But I'm sure he'll get his chances in the next couple of weeks when the games come back into gear. But yeah, very positive from Siska, and with Zenit rocking a bit now, they'll fancy their chances of making this a strong title race. And it was a good win for them, and very comfortable in the end.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how Lars Bohinen's 51-year-old legs would handle the current Moscow weather, to be quite honest. I think he would probably have a difficult time of it.
Absolutely, yes.
Now, Tambov. We have to mention Tambov because on the eve of the weekend, many local fans and Tambov themselves, and just about everybody else in Russian football didn't quite know whether the game was actually going to take place. Now, of course, it did take place in the end, as Loco duly dispatched the cobbled together Tambov side 3-0 at the RJD Arena. But to just briefly cover Tambov for anybody who may not have noticed, not have realised during the winter, or might want a little bit of a breather during the winter, a reminder of what happened. But essentially, Tambov have been hit by some quite hefty financial problems this season, in which players have gone unpaid, debts have spiraled out of control, and actually reached up to 306 million rubles, which is about 3 to 4 million euros. Now, that doesn't seem a lot to most other clubs in different countries, but it's a huge amount to Tambov. And it's believed that just under 50% of this debt is actually due to unpaid player wages alone. Now, this naturally put the future of the club into some serious doubt. Sporting director Pavel Kudyakov had claimed that the Premier League future was heavily in doubt, and the Tambov Oblast governor Alexander Nikitin recently said that Tambov is a non-for-profit organisation. We receive budget supports and grants and should have an additional income, but it's very low, and that they could no longer support the club financially. Now, this continued on for quite some time, where by the start of February, they had only 9 first-team players left. There was no resistance from the club management to stop any further disgruntled players from leaving. There was no more support from the regional government coming in. There was a minimal chance of continuing the season. Now, it was hoped that Valery Oganessian, who was known for his exploits at basically Ararat Moscow, the short-lived Armenian expat club, that he would help them out of trouble. He was actually announced as Tambov's president in a post on the club's official website on the 16th of January, and then it was deleted within half an hour of being live, and now he claims that he never actually held the role. So he allegedly transferred 20 million rubles, which is about 220,000 euros, of funds to his personal account before leaving for Georgia in 2017 when he was at Ararat, and then popped up again here with Tambov and then just disappeared out of nowhere. So it's a very bizarre one, and there's basically been this rumbling on in the background during the entirety of the winter. And then on February the 18th, literally just last week, Meta Ratings reported that Tambov was set to withdraw from the Russian Cup. Later on that day, Championat reported that Tambov were then set to withdraw from the RPL, with a final decision on the future finally made. And then a day later, on the morning of February the 19th, the RFU announced that Tambov have found, literally in quotes, money from somewhere, and will now be able to play in the RPL, and they appealed to other clubs to help Tambov cobble a squad together. Now, as of later on in that day, Sportbox then a reporter for Sportbox found out that the money came from an unnamed private investor who's not from the Tambov region. So by the eve of the game, Tambov had actually managed to cobble together a squad of loanees and free transfers and other players that they already had. Probably the most famous names were maybe Sergei Rizhikov, Saeed Aliyev, Kirill Klimov, Roman Minayev, both on loan from Rubin, Nicholas Unwon, Yevgeny Chabanov. But basically, they had a Vladislav Kalapuzov on loan from Dynamo. They had cobbled together a squad of other RPL loanees, free agents, existing players who for some reason decided to stay despite not getting paid. A little bit of loyalty to the club there, so fair enough. And Chuli were absolutely slaughtered 3-0 by Loco, which you probably would not be surprised by, judging that most of these players were signed literally 3 days before the game took place. So, David, in lieu of the fact that these players had been together for literally 3 days and never really played together before that, how do you think that Tambov fared against Loco?
Should I be kind? I mean, I'm pretty sure at one point in the second half, there was a pop-up for stats and they hadn't had a single shot after 60-odd minutes. So that wasn't good. But obviously, and I can't recall them having a shot, but they might well have done something later on in the game that I'm forgetting. But yeah, it wasn't great. Loco didn't put out a big team either. It was, it was a rotated team. You had Mukhin started and Zhebelekdinov got a rare start and all. There's Sakovic up front. It was easy for them. It was just a matter of time before the first goal went in, which obviously was off the corner. and then after that, yeah, it was just pretty much walking pace for the whole time. You know, half the players in this Tambov team have not played in the RPL at all, and those who have not played enough or not for a long time. Like Denny, sort of, who joined on loan from Arsenal Tula, has probably played less than like 10 games in the last 2 or 3 years. You'd expect. So yeah, it's definitely a ragtag squad. Lots of inexperience, lots of youth in there. Obviously, they said there'll be more players to come in. I mean, it's nice. It's nice, you know, from the clubs to have loaned these players. You know, a couple of these guys like Avanesian from Cisco is highly rated 18-year-old, and he got a start and played. And a couple of guys who've done well in the FNL in the past, like Aliyev and Munayev, who've both proven themselves as worthy FNL scorers. But Munayev obviously just didn't settle at Arsenal, and Aliyev, this is his first go in the RPL. So you know, for 3 days, you know, to only lose 3-0 is something, I suppose. Remember Andrew had said about their defender Farhad Vasiev that he couldn't get into the team at 2 men in the PFL. So the fact that he played a full 90 minutes against Loco is not necessarily reassuring. But I mean, of the whole team, obviously the defence is the strongest bit. You've still got Rizhikov in goal, and they've still got Vitaly Shakov in defence. They're the 2 most experienced players in the team. And Gigashvili, who's still knocking around. Obviously, they played a few fixtures in the winter period as well. So yeah, it's going to be a struggle, that's for sure, for the rest of the season. We'll see what else they do in terms of loans. I was told earlier that they tried to get. Do you remember Leo Jaba, who used to play for Akhmat? I was told that they tried to get him on loan, but it was rejected.
Really?
I don't even know. I'm sure he's at PAOK still. I don't actually know where he plays, but apparently they went in for him. So we'll see what they do. Obviously, they've got until tomorrow on this day of recording to sign some players. So we'll see who else comes in to see if they can strengthen any further, whether it will just be padding out the squad, basically.
Yeah, Leo Jarba's still at PAOK. He's only played like once or twice this season, but I can't say where do they get the money from, but that is the question, is where do Tambov or have Tambov got their money from whatsoever? Now, there has been a little bit of a discussion regarding Tambov on the sort of Russian football echo chamber, and that is whether or not this is the right thing to do. Now, of course, for the Tambov fans and for Tambov as a club and for the players, it's unequivocally excellent news for them. Their club is still alive, absolutely brilliant, absolutely delighted for them that the club can stay alive. But from a larger philosophical, almost economical point of view, is it really right for? I mean, this money came in from a private source and a private investor, so that's completely by the by. Private investment, as long as it was okayed by the relevant governing body, absolutely fine. The issue is in the RFU statement in which they asked other RPL clubs to help out. Now, what if, say, that Arsenal Tula do loan out a certain Denisov to Tambov, and then Tambov maybe suddenly then, I mean, very unlikely because they're pretty terrible, have go on a renaissance and have an excellent last 10 games and stay up at the expense of Arsenal Tula? What about the questions around the integrity of the governing body of the entire country asking the clubs themselves to help and bail out the club in question? Now, like I said, I don't want to suggest that Tambov should not exist, and I'm very relieved that they do, but it just opens up a can of worms in the future that may not be able to be shut, and it is worrying. What if this happens every year? It happened with Amkar, it happened with Angie, it happened with Tomsk, and Tozna, just 4 off the top of my head. What if another club who comes up, say Torpedo Moscow, say they come up, the owner doesn't want to fund them anymore, say they can't afford to run. I mean, this is purely hypothetical. They are being quite well run right now, getting a new stadium and so on. But what if because of this new stadium, they find it difficult to pay the players, and then they say, we want the rest of the RPL to bail us out, help us stay up. It's just opening up a little bit of a worrying can of worms that really should have been avoided and could have been avoided. But for Tambov's benefit, for them and their fans, I'm delighted that it happened. Have you got any thoughts on this, Richard, about maybe the wider ramifications of this recovery?
Yeah, I'd like to echo a lot of what you say there, James. And also as well, I like how you mentioned the Tom Tomsk situation of a few years ago, because obviously, when Tom hit similar financial difficulties halfway through the 2016-17 season, they had to finish out the season with their youth players. Now, obviously, that's not happening at Tambov. They're getting loans from other teams, and you could say it's a little bit disappointing that the same protocol hasn't been applied. I mean, yes, if Tambov were forced to play youngsters like the young kids from like the under-19s team, you might have got some lop-heavy scorelines, and that's not good for the competition. But then again, is it, like you said, the integrity part of it? Is this really good for the competition? In a league like, for example, in England or Germany or something like that, you will never get a situation where if a team hit financial difficulty, there'd be a request from other clubs to loan this team in distress players. So yeah, I think personally, don't get me wrong, I'm happy that Tambov still with us. I don't want to see any football club fold. It's horrible for everybody involved, but I do think that the Tom Tomsk situation should have been applied here, and Tambov should have had to finish the season with the young players. And like I said, the integrity is opened up, the whole competition's opened up, and it's not a good look.
Yeah, absolutely. And they have the worrying thing about all these different cases and these case studies is that every single one was dealt differently. Like you said, whether it be clubs being defunct there and then, surviving to the end of the season with the enormous debts being paid off by the private ownership, say in the case of Tosna, where Fort Group, the St. Petersburg-based retail magnates, paid all of the players until the end of the season and then decided to, we're pulling the plug now. Or like Angie and Tom, where they had to play the kids, and one was relegated to the Finna L, yet the other one was relegated all the way down to the Payfit L. You got Tambov now, who were then saved by other clubs. Basically, I don't want to try and get at the clubs here or get at the other clubs for helping them, because I mean, yes, time out on loan from Minayev and so on is very good for the parent club, but it just shows a distinct marked lack of real regulation that's in place from the top level, and once again harkens back to the same issues again, where there's just not enough sustainability within Russian football in terms of the economics. There's not enough sustainability in terms of the regulations off the pitch, in terms of the actual regulation of the rules, of the regulation of the regulations. There's just no consistency, and it's a little bit of a shame to see once again that it's kind of like the way that the RFU tends to deal with these is by putting a blindfold on and throwing a dart at a dartboard and seeing what it lands on and says, oh yeah, we'll do that this year. And it's a different thing every single time, instead of actually trying to make moves towards long-term sustainable progress of football in the country. Yes, the majority of football fans may be from the top 4, 5, 6 clubs. Yes, when Spartak when Spartak go around Russia, they do have more away fans than the home fans have every game. That's just the way that football happens. But just because of that doesn't mean that you should let these clubs off to die and just leave them to struggle. It's bewildering why the fact that we have to keep bringing this up every single time, and even more so bewildering that every time it's brought up, there seems to be a totally different, random solution to it. But
I mean, one last thing as well. I'd be pretty unhappy, because like I said, I'd be pretty unhappy if I was Rotor or Ufa, for example, who are down there in the relegation zones, and battling relegation with Tambov. I'd be pretty unhappy about it, because unlike Tambov, the finances are still okay, and other clubs are getting them. They've more chance of survival now with these loanees from other clubs than they would have had if they would have had to play their under-19s. So I can understand why Rotor or Arsenal Tula, for example, would feel a little bit upset about it, and Ufa as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Ufa, the biggest case in point for myself. But they're a club who are pushing way above their weight, who have overperformed for years, both financially and on the pitch. And if anything, a lot of their struggles this season has been due to a direct result of their success and losing the best players again and losing the biggest piece of the puzzle in Gazizov. Now, he is back in place. Urunov is back in place at Ufa. But year in, year out, Ufa survive on next to nothing and have worked their way to it. It seems like Tambov stumbled a little bit, but once again, I don't want to try and have a go at the club because I'm delighted they're still alive. David, have you got any last thoughts at all on the Tambov situation?
Yeah, I mean, I might not be on the same page maybe as you in this sense. Like the RPL, yes, they asked, but they didn't necessarily force. They didn't force clubs to do it. Clubs are loaning these players out of free will, because some clubs have said we won't be loaning anyone to them. So the fact that Arsenal have loaned these guys to Tambov, if it comes back to bite them, then that's on them from my perspective, rather than the RFU, because other clubs have said we won't help you. In the past, with the other teams, they they didn't give people loanees or whatever, but in this sense, Tambov, I think, have a very small youth system and youth setup, and actually wouldn't have even had enough players in there, which could be why they did ask for loan players, just because I think they would have had like less than a dozen players in total if they just used the team that they use in the Youth Premier League. So I understand why they've asked probably for it, but just because they've asked doesn't mean they're going to get. And even if they didn't ask, what was to stop Tambov going and asking for players, going and making an offer? What's the word I want to use? Not generically, organically. But they might have gone and made a loan offer, gone to Arsenal and said, "Look, we want a couple of players. Who can we have?" So I don't see it as that, because it wasn't forcing anyone's hand from the RFU. They've just, they simply said, we might need to help things along here.
Yeah.
So, if they go down, they go down. I think they probably will, but we'll see.
Yeah, I suppose it is a moot because they are probably going to go and relegate no matter what anyway. And then
that's true.
It is very similar. I mean, like you said, David, what's any different to them? Because I don't know if I made clear earlier on that it was the RFU asked this because Tambov approached the RFU specifically to say, "Oh, can this happen?" What's the difference between that and Khimki having this relationship, which is not a relationship with Spartak? Well, it clearly is. Like, why the hell would Khimki get so many people from Spartak this season? Just like Sochi, you've got so many people from Zenit. What's the difference between Tambov's, Khimki's, and Sochi's? So that is the other hand of the argument. I just feel a little bit annoyed that I know it wasn't forced, but once again, we're just in this situation because of lack of long-term thinking. So if we're going to move on now, because we need to quickly mention one last team from the Russian Cup, and that was Krylia Sovetov. They are now the sole lower league surviving club in the Russian Cup after a 4-0 victory over Khimki. David, just very quickly, any standouts from the Krylia game?
Yeah, I was going to chop in with something on Khimki there at the end, but we'll leave it. Let's see, Krylia. Yeah, I mean, they just they play Khimki off the park, or we're on Khimki, so I might as well say it. Like, they've only actually signed one player from Spartak all season. Well, okay, they've not all season. They've only currently got one player from Spartak, which is Mirosov.
Glushenkov on loan directly from Spartak as well.
Okay, oh yeah, well, that's the second, but that's it. Like, it's not loads. Obviously, they did have Lomovitsky briefly early in the season, but he soon disappeared. But yeah, they got completely played off the park against Krylia. Krylia showing why we were expecting them to come straight back up this season. Penalty, early doors penalty, which was a penalty, and then second half they swept them away. Khimki had a player sent off earlier on, Andrew Tikhonov's son, who's only had a few appearances in the Premier League, so it wasn't necessarily a strong Khimki squad. Although, it was relatively strong other than that. And then second half, it was just complete and utter domination. Khimki had one time where they hit the post off their only attack that I recall happening, which was just a long ball over the top to Konate. and he hit the base of the post. The second Krylia goal, which was all from Chertanova players, it was built up from Gorshkov, Zinkovsky, and the final finish was from Sipchenko. Really, really nice team goal. And then Sergeyev goes off later on. Job was done. Golenkov comes on off the bench, and just like he's done in the Feniel, played second fiddle, came on, scored, and got an assist within 5 minutes to make it 4-0 at the death, which is more than deserved. Players like Zinkovsky, Sefan were really good, and so was Gorshkov as well at left back. So a resounding victory. And I think in general in the game there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 former Chertanova players in the Krylia squad, plus 1 in the Khimki squad, which is Kamishev, who's on loan from Krylia at the moment this season. So 10 in total in that game have played for Chertanova in probably the last 3 years, which is quite something really. But yeah, it was worrying for Khimki really. Mirzov got very lucky as well. He should have been sent off for me. The VAR turned it over, and I have no idea how, because it was a horrible challenge. So yeah, that it made me think that maybe Khimki's golden spell, could be over, and they might struggle second half of the season. Although arguably, and unfortunately, because I'm not a big fan of them, they've probably already done enough to stay up. Those bottom 4 are really adrift, and they're in the top half of the table. Well, they're not. They're not as high as I thought. So yeah, it was not good, and Khimki and Krylia were more than deserving of it. So I'm all for a Feniel Cup winner. Imagine that.
Yeah, one can dream of Krylia in Europe. It would nearly be as good as a potential Tosner in Europe or a Shinnik Yaroslavl before, or anyone like that before Tosner went out of business. But on the Khimki Spartak thing, it was mainly because they do have a financial agreement where Spartak were given more money by the regional government because Khimki were given more money because of the regional partnership that basically enables Khimki to not go out of business. It's by comparison, it's just very, very similar and a little bit dodgy, a little bit on the dodgy side. But if we're going to move on to now Krasnodar, as they actually faced off against Dinamo Zagreb as the only Russian representative in the European knockout rounds on Thursday. Now, it wasn't exactly the best night for the Bulls. Mislav Orsic and Bruno Petkovic combined well in the night, with the former setting up the latter twice, while Marcus Berg did score and assist Victor Claesson, and in general had an excellent game. However, a winner from Nigerian forward and excellently named Iyayi Believe Atimwian, just 6 minutes after Claesson's equaliser ended the tie. Now, Krasnodar looked dangerous in attack, but the defence was an absolute shambles, and in goal, Yevgeny Gorodov was just even worse. He made numerous high-profile mistakes, at least at fault for 2 of the goals, and potentially even the opener as well. So, David, it's probably fair to say, and maybe an understatement to say, that it was quite a disappointing night.
Yeah, it was. It was disappointing because Krasnodar, while certain players didn't play well, Cabela was largely invisible, which was a shame because we know he can be so good, and I think even last week we all picked him out as the key man. But yeah, just some horrible goalkeeping. The second one, the first one I probably would put on him as well. As I recall, there was maybe 4 shots involved, and it was the 4th one that finally went in. And from that final touch, he challenged the striker in the air and was second best to it. I mean, first of all, keepers should always be first best in the air. But secondly, he probably shouldn't have gone for it and would have been fine if he didn't go for it. And that was the same with the second goal off the corner. Granted, Petkovic was free at the back post, but he was free for a reason because he had very little on. But because Gorodov came and missed it, he had an open goal to just tap it into. Well, not even tap it into, sort of scuff it into. And then the third one, getting beaten like how he did at his near post, just not good.
Awful.
And we bemoaned the absence of Matvey Safonov, and you just think, what would have happened if he was playing? Like, surely he saves the third goal. Keeping the tie at 2-2, while it's not great to have conceded 2 away goals, is a darn sight better than 3. Even if the first 2 were not preventable, let's just say. So, I mean, some people were saying that the third goal was poor defending. I felt it was just good attacking. Petkovic had just a moment of brilliance, where he took the ball on and managed to dribble past 3 or 4 players. Did very well to create the space and create the chance, which eventually opened up on the right side. But I think, obviously keeper should have done much better with it. So yeah, disappointing. We got hope for something special in Zagreb. With their defensive record and the home record, they beat Siska 3-0 there. 2 of the goals are off set pieces on that night. So we have to hope. They've done it before. They did it in Salonika against PAOK, so we know they can do it. And that they've surprised us early in the season. Obviously against Sevilla, they were 2-0 up away as well. So we know they can do it. We know they've got the ability. It's just whether they really show up, and a lot of things have to just go perfectly for them. But it does seem unlikely. And it was a disappointing watch because we all had some good hope for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's why it's so disappointing, because it is the hope that kills you.
And to be let down by something so stupid as an injury and then a bad backup. Like, if we're gonna pin it down to one thing, obviously it is a multitude of things, but at the highest level, we're pinning it down to a poor goalkeeper performance, brought on by the main goalie being injured. Something as simple as that could have changed the fortunes of their whole season potentially. So it's very disappointing, and I think we've said it before that they've had bad luck with injuries, and obviously after a while, when does it stop becoming bad luck and start becoming a problem? Injuries obviously always, or for the most part, are bad luck. But there is obviously something systemic if they keep turning up. But obviously, I'm not near qualified to have a word on it, so I'm just going to say it was bad goalkeeping only.
That's understandable. I think we'll probably have to get some physiotherapists in and some injury specialists from southern Russia to see what they do in the water and what they do a little bit weird in Krasnodar, because generally, injuries are luck, especially when it's just the odd, when it's the type of injury they've had, where it's not like the odd muscle injury again and again. Say the same player getting similar hamstring injuries quite often, where you would start questioning the training regimen. It is like anterior cruciate ligament injury. Okay. Broken leg twice in a row. Shit. Broken ankle. It's full breaks, which are from a lot of the time what seemed to be just quite hard challenges or issues like that. So you've got to feel for them, but once again, this is systemic. Do they not point this out? But we'll get into their transfer business and potential injury issues later on. But from a little bit more optimistic side, maybe even for Dinamo Zagreb as well, Richard, for both teams, did anyone in particular stand out for you in the night?
Well, from Krasnodar's point of view, I really enjoyed Marcus Berg's performance. It's crazy how he's entering the final 6 months, probably arguably the final few months of his Krasnodar career, because we do expect, age 34, he will probably go back to his native Sweden to finish off his career at the end of the season. But, he played like a player, we were mentioning it pre-pod, he played like a player who was 9-10 years younger than what he is. He was brilliant. He took both his goals very well. I really enjoyed the combination with Klaassen for his second goal. Oh, sorry, no, he set up Klaassen for the second goal. Sorry about that. Yeah, he set up Victor Klaassen for the second goal, and the combination play between the two of them was good. And the first goal, it was a bit of a defensive mistake from the Dynamo defender, but he lashed it home. Good finish. Very easy to sky those over the bar. And Krasnodar, in bits and bobs of that game, they played some good attacking football. I think Dinamo Zagreb, I think they'd only conceded, wasn't it, 2 goals in the entire group stage of the Europa League. So Krasnodar, from the attacking point of view, did the right things, but it's down to the whole other situation again. I thought they just didn't defend well, and obviously, Safanov was a huge miss on the eve of the game, and just disappointing from Gorodov, wasn't it? Like I say, like David said, if he'd have stayed on his line for the second goal rather than come in, there wouldn't have been a free open space for the Dinamo Zagreb. For the Dinamo Zagreb player, wasn't it? Petkovic, he impressed me from Dinamo Zagreb. He got the 2 goals to head into, and then the third goal, he should be saving that at his near post. I definitely think Safanov would have saved that. The first goal I can forgive a mistake, but 3 mistakes from the keeper yeah, it's not good. And yeah, they've got quite a task on their hands to turn it around in Zagreb now. They've got to get an early goal if they're going to have any chance there. I guess at the Maximia Stadium, it's going to be behind closed doors. The intimidation factor of playing there is probably removed. But even if Krasnodar were to score, and I think they can score in Zagreb, can you really trust the defence to hold out? I'm just not confident at all. No, and I thought Christopher Olsen was poor too. You know, I mean, first half he was giving away the ball so much in midfield, and I think that contributed to the first of Dynamo's goals. So I'd like to be optimistic, and I still think Krasnodar will score. You know, if Berg replicates that form from the first leg and the second leg, I think they will score. But I just don't have any confidence in Krasnodar's defence, unfortunately. So I'm afraid this is probably where the European campaign ends, unfortunately.
Yeah, likewise, to be honest. I had in my pre-match preview last week that I didn't really expect Krasnodar to kick on too well in terms of attack. They haven't played a competitive game in so long, and Dynamo's defence is so solid, like you said, Richard. It was actually only one goal they conceded during the entirety of the 6 games in the group stage. But
Oh wow,
Krasnodar did show that they have that just next level of attacking quality, and it showed why they have dropped down from the Champions League in the first place. Because going forward, so absolutely brilliant. It's just so frustrating because the mistakes and the defensive issues were just so, I would say, avoidable. But we've had this conversation before with Krasnodar in Europe. But
yeah, too many times.
I did predict a 0-0 because I didn't think Krasnodar would score, and I didn't think that the defense would be too bad away from home with the fans behind them. But I couldn't have been more wrong. But David, do you think that Krasnodar perhaps could they turn it around away from home, and to do so, maybe do they have to change up their approach, or should they just stick to the guns?
I mean, the only change I would make is starting Vanderson. I think he came off the bench at halftime for Sheppy, and I don't know whether that was tactical or a fitness thing. If they're both at the same fitness level, I'd be starting him and using Sheppy as the impact player that we know he is. We know he can have an excellent impact in an open game. And just we've just got to go guns blazing. They've got to go and score 2 unanswered goals at the minimum. If Dynamo score, then it becomes a real headache. So yeah, they've got to go there and they've got to do the business. They really have to. We know they can score, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be very tough. And I, as optimistic as I normally am, I can't see it happening, unfortunately.
Yeah, me either, to be quite honest. But I hinted at it earlier, but I just want to mention Krasnodar's transfer policy. Now, we've mentioned it. We've all mentioned it many times on the pod. Seen it all over different pods. Hanu and Artyom have mentioned it on theirs. We've seen it on Twitter in general. Krasnodar fans wanting the defence to be strengthened. Now, it wasn't, plainly. They have now signed a left back from France, but too late to play in Europe. And it was only really in reaction to the injury of Christian Ramirez. But Richard, first, do you think that Krasnodar are making good use of their foreigner spots, considering who they have in these positions? There's quite a lot of players who have injury issues there, and they were again linked to Fabio Contrao to replace Ramirez. Now that didn't happen in the end, thankfully, because although Contrao is a double Champions League winner with Real Madrid, he once again is a sick note. Now, Krasnodar are a team of sick notes, so do you think there should be questions on the transfer policy?
Yeah, it's interesting how they have a lot of players who are quite injured a lot on their payroll. It's the fact that they were even considering Contrao was just crazy. Like I said, I mean, I think he went a year after he left Real Madrid. I swear he went a year without a club, and I think he's playing for Rio Ave now back in Portugal. But yeah, just to consider him with his injury record, I mean, okay, yes, it's desperation situation. They need a left back to replace Ramirez, who looks like he will be out for quite a while. I've heard it's a cruciate ligament rupture, so that's definitely at minimum a season-ending one. But then to consider Contrao, yeah, surely as well, not just his age, but his tendency to be an injury prone. Surely that's just waving you away from him straight away. I mean, I actually have had a look at Ambroise Oyongo. I've asked a few people who follow French football about him. He lost his place in the Montpellier side this season in France because of a change of formation, but apparently in the last 2 years for Montpellier, he did play regularly for them. I think it was 25 games plus each season, and this was a side that came 6th and 8th in the last 2 Ligue 1 seasons. So that actually does sound quite promising. He can go straight in there too because Ramirez is injured, and I'm absolutely certain he's an upgrade on Yevgeny Chernov. I think he played in MLS as well for Montreal Impact and New York Red Bulls. So it sounds quite promising. 29, good age, and you never know if Ramirez's injury is quite severe and Oyongo impresses. Maybe Ramirez could be displaced. I mean, it's not beyond the realms of impossibility. But on the other foreign transfers, yeah, I think obviously the foreign limit. Yeah, it's Russian football news bingo once again. I've mentioned it. Fortunately, we do have to bring this up because it's such a reoccurring theme, and obviously the 8-player foreign limit hindered Krasnodar in the January transfer window. They look like for next season that they're going to agree a fee with Hatayspor for Aaron Bupenza. He wants to finish out the season at his current club in Turkey, and they're pushing for Europe in Turkey. Hatayspor, it's actually their debut season in Turkish top flight. But it looks like Krasnodar will sign Aaron Bupenza from them, the main striker. I think he's 24-year-old Gabonese forward, who was formerly at Bordeaux's youth team. So it looks like they've made a signing there for next year. But the frustrating thing is Krasnodar couldn't bring him in now as an upgrade on Berg because they were already quoted up with the foreign limit. And they've had issues with this in the past, in the summer. I mean, I personally feel that they made a mistake letting Uros Spajic go, which, I thought he was a better defender than Kayo. And, interesting, Kayo was signed as a defensive midfield player and he ends up playing central defender for Krasnodar. So, yeah, I think Krasnodar definitely need to rejig these foreign spots in the summer. And I think there probably needs to be quite a ruthless mentality towards them too. It's good that they're getting the Bupenza deal done for next season now, and they've got a Berg replacement, a cab ready to go off the rank. But I think they need to really rejig those foreign spots, particularly those two in midfield. Olsen, really disappointing on the night against Dynamo, and he's been steady, but I think Krasnodar can find an improvement there. I've been very disappointed in Villénia, actually. I think, he probably needs to be moved on. And then, Kayo, maybe even is worth considering bringing Uros Spajic back from his loan at Feyenoord. I've heard he's been playing regularly for them. He played against CSKA in the Europa League. And, I think the foreign spots really need rejigging in the summer for Krasnodar, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Krasnodar, for me, really suffer from the one gaping hole in that team, and that gaping hole is the departure and passing of time due to age of Andreas Grankvist. Since he left,
it's a big miss. Big miss.
Yeah, they really don't have enough steel in there. Martinovic is fine in the RPL, absolutely fine, but even he's now 35, and when it comes to these big European games, just gets absolutely slaughtered against real quality opposition. There's just not enough pure steel in there where a type of defender whose job is defending first as well as doing everything else that is required of a Krasnodar player. David, do you have any thoughts on these foreigners at Krasnodar, the current crop?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were chatting about it, or I was chatting about it with someone the other day, and I was arguably you'd probably keep 3 or 4 of the foreigners at most who are there. Now I'll let Krasnodar off for the January. Because you build a squad for this season at the start of the season. Now, granted, they had a very short summer to do it in, although it was technically a very long window, but they had a very short break to build the squad. And they obviously went into this with the brand new limit for this season, right? So they had to trim down the squad. They had to say, right, these are the foreigners we want, and we're going to have to just gamble with it. Now, January is notoriously difficult for moving players on. Remember the Premier League, I think, English Premier League had only 4 or 5 permanent transfers for the whole of January. So to get clubs moving players around in a normal January is difficult enough, but in a January in a pandemic, very difficult, and especially with the limit filled up. So I think they've made their decisions at the start of the season on the squad, and just gone with it. I seem to recall Spajic left from his own for his own choice rather than Krasnodar forcing him out. But I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. So yeah, but Berg, you'd be moving on for Bupenza if that's going to happen. I don't know much about Bupenza. Like, I've never seen him, but I know of his record, obviously, for this season. You have to hope it's not a flash in the pan record. Berg's move on. I'd move Olsen on. I'd move Kayo on. I'd move Villeneuve on if I could. You'd be keeping, although they're getting old, both in their... Well, Klaassen, I think, is just 29, is he, I think. But Klaassen and Cabelli, you'd be keeping both just because of their actual talent. In fact, they're good. Ramirez, you'd probably be keeping because he's a good RPL left back. He showed it in the first half of the season in the Champions League where he played on the wing and scored that nice goal against Rennes as well. Very unfortunate, to have an injury so last minute and after. He got his injury after the Europa League registration was done, so there was nothing they could do about that. They've just had to try and get someone in to fill in this void in the league. And obviously options are thin. I'm not going to comment on stuff that didn't happen. We don't actually know if they were really interested in Fabio Contral or whether that was just paper talk. But they, brought this guy Yongo in, and he probably won't stay in Russia past this season. He'll likely come in just to help fill the squad out for the rest of the season, and that'll be that. So they definitely need to do something with their squad in the summer. Obviously, a lot will depend on what happens with the limit, whether it stays at 8, whether things change. That'll alter the situation massively. I think if they're planning now, which they should be, most clubs are planning way in advance on their transfer situation. They should be planning for 8 and doing the best they can to plan for that 8. Scout their targets, analyze their targets. Try and find other targets if they've not already got them, and plan that squad now, ready for next season. That's what the top clubs will be doing with their analysts and scouts. So, and if the limit changes and they're allowed more, then bonus. They can expand their plans and look at targets who may be further down the list, not priorities. Maybe they're looking at 2 strikers, but they only need 1 because of the limit. Maybe if the limit changes, they can buy 2. So that's what you'd be hoping they're doing, and they need to do it because ultimately, for a club of their stature, although Berger's good, he's still scoring regularly in the Premier League and was fantastic against Dynamo. If Bupenza's coming in and his contract's up and he's getting on a bit, it's just a good mixture of things to say, okay, let's just part ways here. But yeah, I agree with Granqvist. I remember at the World Cup, he was just phenomenal for Sweden at such an old age. And they've had no real leader there. Obviously, Spajic, even in his first season, wasn't great, but in that second season, he was good until he picked up his injury. And then we never saw him again after his injury. He came back in the summer and went straight off to Feyenoord on loan. So yeah, they need to go out there and get a real leader for the center of defence. I don't know who that is. Ideally, you'd want someone who can communicate well with the players around him. So it may not be necessarily a Russian. They've got Martinovic and Sorokin as the Russian speakers if they need them. So yeah, that's got to be priority number 1. But they need to try and improve their foreigner usage, definitely, if the limit's going to stay so restrictive.
Yeah, certainly. In an ideal world, the limit just is removed entirely. But there is, and of course, an ideal world. And there's a 99.9% chance that the Fabio Contral rumours was pure just agent talk. It's quite funny that this is the man who retired in January 2020 through injury, only to then return in October 2020 to play for Rio Ave again, the same team, 9 months later. And has been, if you type in Fabio Contral transfer and just go on to the news section of Google, there's just like story after story after story of Contral linked to this club, Contral linked to that club. So someone's agent's obviously putting in overtime. It's just quite a nice little humorous aside that the most injured squad in the history of injured squads reportedly tries to sign the most injured player in the history of injured players. And on that, of course, that's the end of this week's RFN podcast. On the site at RussianFootballNews.com, as per, we'll have the full preview of the Krasnodar game, and that's the return of our Krasnodar specialist, Willem Baumgartner. Also on the site this weekend, as aforementioned, we'll have a new and special video of Quincy Promes' first time in Russia to celebrate his return. Now, Connor, Artyom and Hanu are putting some overtime work in and really rushing to get that one done, but it's looking really good so far, and it's definitely one for Spartak fans to reminisce about and get a little bit of hype maybe about his potential return. But by the time we return for the next podcast, the RPL will have been back. Both leagues, the RPL and the FNL, kick off again this weekend. Some of the big games in the RPL, Zenit Rostov, Logo Siska and Spartak Rubin. You can catch them all live on the RPL YouTube channel. And in the FNL, there's a massive clash at the top of the table as first place Nizhny hosts second place Krylia on Saturday morning. Now you can also catch that at either Yandex Afir or SportRex, depending on what country you're watching it in. David, now I'm aware that maybe last week you weren't quite allowed to discuss this new Scouted Football handbook you teased, but you can go into a little bit more detail on it.
That's right. Yeah. New handbook number 9 is out. It's now available for purchase. I've been lucky enough to contribute again with a profile on yet another Siska player. This time, I promise I don't choose them. Most of the time, I'm giving like, okay, do you want to do this guy or this guy? Like we have a short list, and then they give me we need a midfielder. Let's do Oblikov. So it's even Oblikov in there this time from me, and the excellent Alex Stewart, who I'm sure you're both very aware of from Tifo Football, has done a profile on Matvey Safonov. So I'm really looking forward to that. Shows that maybe the Russian Premier League is getting a bit more notice than we thought for someone like Alex, who I believe has a background in goalkeeping. And certainly I know he's friends with Aidan, who has done work with us on the goalkeepers before. So look forward to reading that. And they've branched out from just profiles. There's lots of stories in there as well, interviews. I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on it and seeing how they've expanded the book with the new features. So yeah.
That's good to hear. I didn't realise it was just not profiles this time.
Yeah, expanding big time. It looks really, really nice.
Cool.
Very good. Good to hear.
Richard, we're expecting a new article from yourself in the very imminent future, perhaps, on some transfers.
Yes, you certainly are. We certainly are. Obviously, the transfer window shuts tomorrow, so I've got a short list of the 10 deals, the best deals for the January the winter transfer window in Russia. I've got a number of them down now, and there's a few more I'll be adding. There's a couple that's been announced recently, and they'll be on that list. And going to finish that off next few days, and it should be out on the site around next week. So yeah, 10 transfers to watch from the winter transfer window.
Excellent. Now, this has been the RFN Podcast. Goodbye for now.
Идет футбольный матч, летит над полем мяч. Веди его, беги, точнее его ударь. Но мяч берет с ноги решительный вратарь. Не напрасно футбольное поле самых ловких и смелых влечет. Здесь нужны тренировка и воля, быстрота, увлечение, расчет.